protesters, shoulder to shoulder, inches away from cops. Yeah, that's the great! Screaming the most disgusting things.
What is the Black Lives Matter movement and how did it gain its momentum? The Black Lives Matter movement has been at the top of almost every news line since the end of March, beginning of April. Since their formation in the early 2010s, the Black Lives Matter effort has spent their time lobbying for change when it comes to systematic racism and discrimination within the borders of the United States. The United States has had a long history of tormenting and unmoral actions on people or of people of color, dating back to before the Constitution was even a thought. Violence on Black citizens is an ever-going issue. Countless Black lives have been lost through police violence, and the names that have sent everyone over the edge were George Floyd and Breonna Taylor.
George Floyd was an unarmed Black man who was at a store in Minneapolis, Minnesota when the police tried to detain him on the thought that he paid with a counterfeit $20 bill. While being detained, Officer Derek Chauvin knelt on his neck, and during that 8 minutes and 46 seconds that Chauvin knelt on helpless Floyd's neck, Floyd continuously cried out, "I can't breathe." None of the officers took his pleading seriously, and Floyd later passed away due to suffocation.
Now, as the year 2020 comes to an end, people around the world have heard the cries for equality from African American activists and other citizens who demand justice for the unethical actions of the U.S. government towards people of color. As the Black Lives Matter movement continues to run strong, their impact on the racial injustice in America and their impact around the world is just now starting.
BLM movement is the most influential effort in the 21st century because of its use of social media, a strong background and basis, and coverage on the news.
The unprecedented use of social media as a marketing strategy to help gain support for the Black Lives Matter efforts. One of the reasons the BLM movement has been so influential is through the use of social media. Within the past 10 years, social media has grown astronomically and has turned into a major marketing platform used by all. So many have heard and seen the death of George Floyd through the videos being posted on social media that it helped to gaslight and continue the fight for racial justice within the United States.
By having the death of George Floyd at people's fingertips, the Black Lives Matter movement was able to use it as a martyr. People could no longer push the presence of police violence and injustice to the side. This method, called mediated mobilization, has been populated by Black Lives Matter activists and is the reason why the number of supporters grew so quickly. Citizens were seeing the unfair treatment of people of color by officers, amplifying their reason to support the cause.
According to Frank Leon Roberts, author of Black Lives Matter, How It Changed the Way Americans Fight for Freedom, this movement has forever changed the way people fight for freedom in modern-age societies. Due to what is called mediated mobilization, the number of people and resources able to be reached through social media has used its abilities to connect others to turn into a useful weapon. This free marketing strategy not only changed the way people protest, but how others from here on out will fight for humanitarian issues. The BLM movement stands on the foundation that America was created on the backs of slaves. It's to no one's surprise that America was built on the backs of slaves. As colonies were growing, African people were brought over for free labor to work plantations. As it was widely known, plantations at the time, and as well as crops, were the wide source for the economy to keep the colonies going, and without it, the colonists would have never had the funds to rebel against the British king. After American colonists won the war, they wrote in the Constitution that all men were created equal and free. They were not meaning African American slaves at the time. This systematic mistake integrated the views that Black people were not created equal to white people. This fundamental mistake placed into the Constitution by slave owners themselves has been put into our brains from a very young age that African Americans are not equal under the eyes of the American government. This has allowed police brutality and things like racist views in Trump 2020 to continue going on unaffected and unpunished. This is the basis that the Black Lives Matter movement sits on, and this is what makes it such a strong and influential argument. Others around the world and in our nation have known this has been an ever-growing issue and are finally coming to light and seeing that something needs to be changed. Many believe that until a public apology is issued by the American government and amends are made, that nothing will change and this fight will keep going on. The Black Lives Matter movement reaches people all across the globe due to its coverage earned on major news outlets. The final reason that the Black Lives Matter protest is such an influential protest of the 21st century is the coverage on national and worldwide news media outlets. With coverage on outlets like ABC and CNN, people around the globe have joined in through the fight by hearing and listening to the reasons on what is happening in America. Even though the protests and protesters are all over the news, not all of the coverage is good. Many outlets like Fox News are using videos of people looting and crazy drivers only wanting to cause damage to cities as ways to bash and disarm the protesters and their cause. Up next, I want to show a TikTok that proves that this is in fact false, and many outlets such as Fox News are manipulating and changing the story to make it look like the protesters are only there for one thing, which is very incorrect. That video, found on the social media platform TikTok by Madeline Edwards Photos, shows the accurate side of what the BLM protests are and how the news should be covering it. Even with all of the news outlets that are covering it as a negative and not a positive impact on the world, the Black Lives Matter movement is becoming so influential around the world because of the coverage. Like the saying goes, there's no bad press, only good press. This stands true for this movement. With the news coverage covering so much of the protest and showing so much of the world what is happening in America, it's actually lifted others up to follow in our footsteps, and there has been protests all over the world, Europe, Australia, Asia, everywhere in between. People are coming together for a common cause. To conclude, do you see why the BLM movement is the most influential of the 21st century? The BLM movement has grown so much in a few short months. Systematic racism and injustice are continuing to be brought to light through its efforts, reaching people across the nation's borders and the world. To utilizing new technology and media outlets, as well as having a strong argument basis, it is no doubt that this movement will forever change the way citizens fight for justice. With its ever-growing strength and its ever-growing impact, the BLM movement is the most influential effort in the 21st century because of its use of social media, a strong background and basis, and a coverage on the major news outlets. Okay, let's do this.